Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you are listening to me. I hope everyone is alright. As you can see by the title of the video, I call this one America is Going Broke. And I have seen data from a lot of places, but today I'm going to read uh, an article with you from Fortune magazine written by Eleanor Pringle. And although I do not agree with absolutely everything she's saying, I don't think the downfall will be that slow. I do agree in the figures, in the numbers, in the facts. But again, I'm not monetizing any of these videos, so I'm not going to make absolutely no money from this. It's like just you and me. We were sitting at the cafe and we were reading this. Okay, and if you want to visit the site that's going to appear in your screen, okay, subscribe to them if you want to, or just pay them a visit. So, without further ado, let's read. America is going broke slowly, says JP Morgan, as national debt balloons and tariff revenue looks shaky. Again by Eleanor Pringle. JP Morgan's David Kelly warned this week that while America is going broke, it is doing so slowly enough that markets aren't panicking yet. I disagree. I have seen a lot of panic. With US national debt now topping 37.8 trillion and interest payments exceeding 1.2 trillion, Kelly said the debt to GDP ratio, this is very important, already at 99.9%, will likely keep rising even under moderate growth. Despite tariff revenues and temporary deficit relief, again, my cat is opening my door. He cautioned that political choices or a slowdown could quickly worsen the fiscal picture, urging investors to diversify away from US assets before going broke slowly turns fast. Well, if you don't understand this, it's very simple. Let me just focus back on me again in a minute. The wealth of a country is not in how much debt that country has or has not. The GDP is also an important indicator, but it also does not tell the entire history. The key issue here is how much do you produce in terms of wealth and how much you have to pay in debt. Look, if an economy is rich enough to have a lot of debt, and all modern economies have debt, meaning they borrow today what they will pay tomorrow, to be very simplistic, to be very simple, this means that, like what happened to the UK, it's a perfect example. Why did the economy took such a downturn, sorry. It took such a downturn, my cat opened my door again. God, today she's sensing winter. she's always she's cold and she wants to be cuddled. My God, but uh, the economy, as long as you are able to produce enough wealth to pay your debt, There is no issues in borrowing money in the market and continue to finance projects, for example, like investing in infrastructures, creating jobs, creating wealth itself by borrowing. Okay, what happened to the UK was this: the UK used to be in a privileged position, acting as a gateway into a number of European countries. So it was receiving a lot of money, a lot of investments, companies that installed in the UK to operate in all over Europe using the seamless system of the single market. Okay, the freedom of movement and all of that. Okay, when that stopped, those companies, despite what the Tories and what Reform is now also trying to say, what Labour is trying to mask, but they are more or less admitting to it, what happened? Those companies simply got out of the UK and they went into other countries in Europe. So, for example, you can tell me this: oh, the headquarters of this and that bank is still here and whatever. Okay, but let me tell you this: where are the people that give the order? Where are the people that sign the checks? Because maybe it's more simple for them to have their tax, let's call it, their tax domicile in the UK and paying lower taxes, and only having to pay taxes over profits in Europe, for example. Meaning they basically avoid. Imagine this. Imagine that the annual tax that a company has to pay in the UK is, I don't know, 10%, okay? And if they install themselves in France, they will have to pay 20%. Unless it is profitable to do just that, they will keep the headquarters in the UK and they will open a company or a subsidiary in France. But in practice, that subsidiary then will act as the mother home. I know people sometimes don't understand this. They look, they see a building with a big billboard, headquarters of this or that, and they think it's there. Like this is the 19th century, and there's some Ebenezer Scrooge guy with a big coffer full with gold bullion and counting his coins like Scrooge McDuck. Okay, but that's not how things work. And then those companies, like a lot of British companies have done, for example, they then establish headquarters, let's call it like this, in Europe. And when it comes time to pay taxes, they will pay only what they would pay in the UK, or they will make their tax revenue, for example, in the UK, and present a declaration to the government, for example, of France, stating that they have paid their taxes in France. But they will still have to pay taxes over the profits that they make in France. Because unlike the UK, unfortunately for the British, it is very hard to siphon wealth from the country. It's very easy, for example, for a foreign company to install itself in France, for example. Very easy. But it's very hard to get out with the money because every penny that you make, you're going to have to pay taxes over it. Even if you don't have your tax domicile there, you will pay taxes over your profits. This is one of the reasons for Brexit, okay? Because British companies they realized they could no longer do what they were doing and acting as gateways for foreign investors that were pouring money into the UK, okay, siphoning money from the UK and from Europe and not paying taxes. Right now, for example, the UK is doing some good things, like for example, fining for Chan and all of that. It's good, okay? It's a sign that maybe they are learning. But right here in Europe, the rules are very simple. Look, you can work here and you can have your business here. If you don't pay your taxes, look, the government is going to take it. It's simple as that, and you won't be able to operate here, and you will be blacklisted and all of that. And this is something that also American companies do not like. Reason why a lot of those companies are moving out from Europe because they simply cannot operate. And the ones that have financial capability, they are opening subsidiaries that act like mother homes, okay, like I was starting to tell you, in Europe. But this is something that's a bit longer, and that would require for us to look into a lot of stuff. So this is just a notion so that you understand a bit about this. And now, this ratio of what you produce in terms of, and I'm just talking about wealth, okay? I'm not talking about production, I'm not talking about inflation, I'm not talking about any of that, okay? I'm just talking about this. The government raw produces this amount of wealth and it has this amount of debt, okay? And it's this ratio that gives you the wealth of a country. If the country always produces much more than its debt, then it's a wealthy country. If it doesn't, it's a poor country. Okay? And it's like telling, for example, imagine a country produces 100 but pays 110. Okay, so they have negative 10. And imagine that a smaller country only produces 50, but it only produces 50, yes, but it has a debt of 30. It's 20 positive. It's a better economy than the other one that is larger. Okay, and that debt will be worth more for the people that are loaning them money to the that are loan not to them to the economy, that are loaning money to the economy in the form of bonds, of investments, of the ratio and value of companies and all of that. Okay, they will earn money because no one is going to lend you money without having something in return. And what do they collect? They collect the interests of the debt. And if your debt increases, okay, your interests in the sense interests that are returned to the debt seller, or to the debt buyer, sorry, they are going to receive less profit. And this is the issue. This is what is happening right now to the American investors, and why so many people have simply stopped investing in the American. And then you also have the dollar decreasing in value or in relation to other comparable currencies. This is one of the reasons why, for example, right now in international purchases, there are a lot of American companies that have to pay in euros because 1 euro is always worth 1 euro, if you know what I'm trying to tell you. And $1 is worth $1 today, it's worth 50 cents tomorrow, it's worth 25 cents in the day after, and no one knows where it will fall. I think it's nearly 10 in terms of relative loss of currency value. But you can check that, okay? Please do. Now, but let's continue because this part is interesting. Uh, they say here, and rightfully so, in my opinion also, that the debt will likely keep rising even under moderate growth. And you have to remember that the USA is not growing that much, despite what all the people are saying, okay? And then they say things like this that I don't agree, despite tariff revenues and temporary deficit relief. They are, uh, look, They are literally masking words and fooling people because what they say here, despite tariff revenues, they should say despite tax increases on importations. This is what they should do. Say, and temporary deficit relief. What deficit relief? The deficit relief, perhaps, of firing essential workers and then having to rehire them again. So, as you can see, these are some of the reasons why I don't agree with this language. But let's continue. But please, when you see tariff revenues, read import taxes on American importation. Okay, what the Americans import, because that is what they. And I knew this uh, since mid-February. I was listening to Asian investors talking about sell all your American stuff, literally. And as far as January, I had the same thing around here in Europe. Although I am not rich and I cannot invest, but I know people that do invest, and I know, and I can read, thankfully, okay? Because they are talking about this, it's going to broke slowly, turns fast. This is going to be very quick. America is going broke. JP Morgan Asset Management's chief global strategist David Kelly wrote in a note this week, but no one is panicking yet because the government is going broke slowly. This is very, how can I put this? This is, in my opinion, this expression right here is very cynical. Okay, because the first persons that are going to be hit by this are the little investors. They are going to be completely run out of the business. And considering a place like the United States, where so many people, they don't actually have a type of retirement plans like we have here in Europe, where you uh, literally deduct portions of your pay every day of your life, so that you can then have a minimum a minimum pension according to how much you paid the state. People there, they invest their money to have pension pension funds. So we are going to find a lot of people, like we already see people with reduced pensions or even no pension at all. And then you are going to have 80 years old Walmart greeters. Okay, I don't know, but I don't like that, neither to myself, neither to others. But let's carry on. I want to read this article because it's very interesting. Kelly outlined that while the economy is facing a barrage of issues, geopolitics, trade wars, changing immigration enforcement, and government shutdowns, to name a few, talk about metaphor. One of the key long-term issues is how the US government is going to pay its bills. That's a good question. In a bid to wrangle down federal debt and its contributions to the wider national debt, President Trump initially asked Tesla CEO Elon Musk to form the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, with the goal of axing $2 trillion from the federal budget, which would be, as we can see, a drop in the ocean. But the pair then famously fell out over blah blah blah. We all know this history. And we'll add another 3-4, meaning they will even have to add more national debt over the next decade. And then here is the big lie. The White House countered its tariff regime will offset the spending and any decrease in revenues owing to tax cuts. The CBO estimates that tariffs should reduce total deficits by 4 trillion by 2035. And this is absolutely bullshit. These tariffs will only reduce investment inside of the country, reduce employment, and reduce production of GDP. And if you have a low GDP, then you will have a high debt, then your currency will be worthless. And you will even have to pay more. Let me focus on me. You will even have to pay more on your debt because it will be more expensive. What do I mean by this? I will explain to you. Today, for example, imagine that you pay 1% of, I don't know, let's make it 5%. You pay 5% for every $100 uh, that the state borrows. As the currency becomes more and more, let's call it worthless, you will need, for example, to have those same 5% if they keep it, but let's say they do. They keep the same 5% over the debt. For example, you will not need $100. You will need $150 to have the same value of the previous $100 because the currency will become worthless. It will reduce its value. And as this situation spirals, the only option, you know what you want to know what the only option will be? The only option will be to cut services. And all these government shutdowns and all of this, like for example, taking 5 billion from science investments to pay off the military, this is going to become common. They are going to have to cut and cut and cut until there's nothing to cut. Again, using the UK, like in the UK, only now Starmer is starting to timidly tax the rich, but he has been crushing him. And let's be absolutely clear. First of all, it isn't him. It was not him that started all this. Okay, it was the Tories. The Tories started this. Okay, so let's make it clear. All they have been doing is crushing the low in the middle class with taxes and indirect taxes. And in a sense, mildly and more controlled, this has also been happening in Europe. Difference is that here we have been countering that with massive investment in infrastructures, in manufactures, in things that provide money to the economy. And we have not been cutting essential services, but things like, for example, the increase of the retirement age and all of that, they are just symptoms of the same disease. Issue is how it is treated here, and how it is treated in the UK or in the US, where people simply don't have anything. Okay, let's continue to read the article. Uh, America's national debt is spiraling higher by the second. At the time of writing it, sits at over 37.8 trillion already. Oh, okay, you already said this. And there are 1.2 trillion in interest payments to service the borrowing, meaning you are paying 1.2 trillion dollars just in interest. And they have expressed concerns about it. Well, of course. Kelly's point is that while investors are mindful of the basic math, the problem is going to unfold over a long period of time. Meaning, they are telling people to keep calm while they themselves remove their money to better shores. The question I am asked more frequently by investors and financial advisors is, when is the federal debt going to blow up in all of our faces? My usual answer is that while we are going broke slowly. Global bond markets are very well aware of the trajectory of US debt. The fact that even today the US government can borrow money for 30 years at a yield of just 4.6% speaks to a conviction that there remains room for the government to borrow more. Meaning, Keep keep mooching the cow until it doesn't give any more milk. Meanwhile, the people that live in on top of the cow get effed trying to cut down on the swearing. Optimism or naivety. The Economist wrote that in the near term, casual speculators may have some reason for optimism. For example, he pointed to tariff, again, more lies, to tariff revenues ranking in a significant sums, 31 billion in August. These are all taxes on the American economy. And recent estimates from the CBO and the Committee for Responsible blah, 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 for fiscal total 6% of the GDP, down from 6.3% last year, because the GDP is also reducing. This reduction in borrowing as a percentage of economic growth is a key factor watched by America's lenders. A nation's GDP debt to GDP ratio is a clear barometer of whether it will be able to repay its debts or pay higher interest rates to sell its borrowing. But Kelly caution, it's worth pausing here to consider the number. The total federal debt in the hands of the public is now almost 30.3 trillion, or we estimate 99.9% of GDP. Starting from these levels, if nominal GDP grows by roughly 4.5% going forward, comprised of 2% real growth and 2.5% inflation, then any budget deficit not of 4.5% will cause the debt to GDP ratio to rise. Under our assumptions, the debt to GDP ratio climbs from 99.9% on September the 3rd, 30th of September 2025, crazy American dates, to 102.2% of GDP 12 months later. Debt is likely to rise even quicker than this, he added. Again, we are reading all of them. Remember to read this on taxes on American importers. On tariffs, for example, there are still questions about the legalities of Trump's actions. If they are overturned by the US Supreme Court, this would at minimum force the administration to go back to the drawing board to impose replacement tariffs under some other authority or by sending a bill through Congress. Moreover, it could force substantial refunds of tariffs already paid in recent months, meaning pay back the taxes to the American importers, Kelly added. Moreover, these estimates are reliant on no recession and no need for other major spending on domestic or international priorities, reason why they cut US aid. Questions about whether USA may already technically be in a recession in some states are growing. In my opinion, yes. The United States is already in a recession and not just in some states. Kelly adds, because of all of this, a deficit equal to 6.7% of GDP should probably be regarded as a lowball estimate of this year's red ink. The takeaway for investors is diversifying their portfolios in case America's debts begins to spiral more quickly than the current environment, Kelly said. Meaning, get your money and run. There is a danger that political choices lead to a faster deterioration in the federal finances, leading to a backup in a long-term investment rates and a lower dollar. Based on current allocations and valuations alone, many investors should likely consider diversifying their portfolios by adding alternative assets and international stocks. The risk that we move from going broke slowly to going broke quickly adds an important reason to make this move today. Now, you then here has there's a small bio of the author, and you can see the full bio here. Now, again, this is an article that is unfortunate, but I've seen other articles speaking about the same subjects. My kitty is here again. She's sleepy and she wants to go to bed. Sorry, folks. Now, uh, what we have to take away from this is that the market itself is telling the investors in the US's economy to literally grab the money and run. This is a type of situation. Look, these are not sayings that happen quickly. This is a slow deterioration. The problem is the issues that this is causing, they are already hitting the people that are down below. And as you can see in this article, maybe because it's an American article, they are talking about tariffs as revenues to the state. But tariffs are just added taxes that the government is imposing directly on the importers and the producers that need to import items to produce, and then they pass on that cost to the consumer. And then the consumer says they should eat the taxes, just like Mr. Trump said. The issue here is that a business cannot survive without profit. And why should a business care? Why should a business care about doing social service? They are there providing a service, giving you your food, your energy, your your water, whatever. Okay, they are producing all this, but for a profit. Okay, no one is going to work just to provide for you. That is an a very infantile, a very childless, I don't know. Sorry, English is not my first word. That's a very infantile notion. A business is there prim- primarily to obtain a profit, and the state forces those companies, if it's a normal state, to provide that service in good and fair conditions, making sure they make a normal profit, that they are not working, for example, like a cartel, that they are not overcharging people. But the issue here is that when I start to listen to the prices of certain goods and that the American people complain about, and you have to understand this, okay? I'm not saying this to mock or with any kind of Schadenfreude, nothing like that, okay? I'm just being factual, okay? They start to complain, and then I look at the products. Coffee, for example, meat. I suppose most Americans don't know that almost half of their meat is not produced in the United States. In some cases, it's not even packaged and processed in the United States. It comes from other places, like, for example, Brazil. Your coffee, of course, it also comes from other places. Colombia, you know, uh, Brazil, and other countries that produce coffee. Hmm? These are You cannot plant coffee in your country. Okay, you can plant it here, but I don't know if it's economical viable. There is viability economically to produce all of these things in greenhouses or whatever. In sugarcane, for example, and all of those things. Okay, and more than that, the issue here is that the United States are attacking the same populations that do this work, that work in the farms, that work in the factories, okay? And the USA is not even producing that much, okay? You evolve from an economy that was producing to this monster so to speak. I'm not calling the country a monster, okay? I'm monster in the sense of the dimension of a country that can afford to have 30, almost $40 trillion in debt because it still produces more wealth than it has debt. But what the Trump government did effectively was, first of all, to sever a lot of economic ties, a lot of market shares that the USA practically dominated or that the USA was very comfortable in being, with Canada, with Europe, with China. Yes, with China, okay, with Japan, with Korea, with pretty much every country in the world, except perhaps Iran. Okay, and then you have a president that applies tariffs, and like I explained to you in other videos, I explained to you the difference of what a tariff is, and you use tariffs to protect an area of your economy. For example, like China does, like Europe does, you impose tariffs, for example, to imported cars. Why is that? So that you can maintain the production of your cars in your country. You don't impose tariffs to extort money from the people because if a producer comes here, no, you want to know what he did? It's as simple as this. You were importing, I don't know, Portuguese wine. Why not? You were importing Portuguese wine and you were only paying, I don't know, I think it was 5% or 2 or 3%, something like that, of tariffs over that good. And then the government steps in and said, no, 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 20%. So you, in the USA, to import that wine, instead of paying 2% of tariffs over that good, you are going to pay 20% of tariffs over that good. The person that is exporting you the wine, he will tell you, look, I used I used to send you this wine at this price, and you paid your 2% of tariffs to your government. I will continue to send you the wine, but now you will have to pay 20%. And then you, as an importer, you will have to decide if you want to accept that situation or not. And then you have to consider something else. Portugal, for example, wine is going to do something else. If you, oh no, I cannot, you say, sorry, I used to buy 100 bottles, but now I can only buy 50. Okay. And the Portuguese exporter to you says, okay, from the band, there is another importer, Chinese, for example. The Chinese love, they like our wine. And they say, you have 50 bottles extra? Okay. I will buy it from you at the same price the Americans will buy. Or even more, or perhaps less, who knows? Okay. And then he turns to you and says, look, why not instead of selling me just 50 bottles and selling 50 bottles to the Americans, why don't you sell me your own 100 bottles and I will pay you more than he is paying you? I ask you, as an American, and if you ever had a business, what are you going to do? You're going to sell to the new buyer. Less issues, less problems, money in your hands, a steady flow of trade. And perhaps you will be smart about it and you will diversify and you will say to the Chinese, okay, look, I will keep selling, I will sell instead of selling you 100, I will sell you 80. And then you grab those 20 bottles that you still have and you will sell, for example, 10 bottles to the same American importer, you will say, look, I'm sorry, but I can only sell you these ones. And you will, for example, sell 5 bottles to Canada, 5 bottles to Mexico, whatever. You understand the logic? This is, for example, this is what Europe is doing. What are we buying from the United States? Oil, gas, and weapons. And Mr. Trump, the only concession that the US, the EU did was to allow uh, countries to buy weapons from the United States. But this is very important. They did not allow countries to buy weapons from the USA using the weapon procurement fund, at least from what I have seen. This means that the countries in Europe, they will still have that credit to buy weapons. They can buy weapons from the United States, but it will never be in the number that it used to be. And now he is also blackmailing NATO. Okay, he tried to get France and Germany to enter a scheme to buy weapons from the United States via NATO to supply to Ukraine, and they said no. I don't know if any country entered the scheme or whatever, but I have a feeling the no country in Europe actually went for it. I don't even think even the UK went into it. But as for the UK, I'm not certain. Okay, mm, just a bit of water. So I thought it would be interesting for us to read this little piece. I'm not going to include this in the Newswatch videos because I was just reading on and talking a bit about this, using it as a base for my video. But what you need to understand is this. If you have any kind of investment in American assets, I would strongly advise you to remove your investments, okay? Because it's not worth it. And also to consider this, Europe has the Eurozone. China has its own system. A lot of Canada also has its own system. Okay, all countries in the world, they are diverging from the monster, so to speak. And the monster, look, I'm not going to tell you that if the USA enters in a full-blown recession, like I think it will, honestly, if it continues as it is, if there is no extraordinary event, it will happen. Okay, it will happen. It's already happening. Okay, these things it's like, for example, people talking about war with Russia. We have been in war with Russia since they invaded Crimea. Okay, a hybrid type of war, but we have been in war with them ever since that moment in time. And you Americans, you are already in a recession. You might not feel the pinch yet, but the government shutdown right now, it's a symptom of that. They wanted at all costs to approve. Like I said, I talked about it, and I think I talked about it in another video of the reasons of the shutdown. And it was basically Trump wanted to do whatever he wanted to do, and he wanted the Democrats to shut up and vote. And the Democrats said no, no, no. If you want to go through this, we are going to have to vote on it. We are going to have to negotiate, and there are things we will not accept. But they were willing to negotiate. Look, they were willing to negotiate just to avoid the government shutdown, and it happened. Now Trump, like I said, he removed money from the budget to science that is funding a lot of services, including scientists, that will see their fund cut. And if you are a scientist, you will understand this. They will grab their knowledge, their projects, and they will go elsewhere. I don't know. Canada, Australia, Europe, China, Japan, Korea, whatever. Science will move. Okay. I even here, look, even here in little Portugal, I have heard reports, even in the news, of scientists relocating here that are now working with universities here, for example, in European projects. This is just an example, okay? And it's not just that, okay? It's teachers, it's engineers, uh, and this is just the first wave, okay? I already talked with a couple of friends about this, uh, and this is just the first wave. First, we will receive people with money. Then, first, we were receiving people with money. Now, we are receiving people with skills. And in another decade or so, I if we are here, I hope that I'm wrong. You are going to start to see a lot of manual workers that are coming here, carpenters, okay? Because already we are filling up those gaps with people from traditional places of immigration here. We also immigrate to there from South America, from Brazil, from Argentina, places that have similarities in the culture. Okay, it's not the same. Of course, not even the language is exactly the same, but there are similarities. Okay, if you grab a Brazilian person and you put him in a Portuguese society, that person will integrate easily. An Argentinian, the same. From other places of South America, not so much. Only perhaps from Venezuela and from Cuba. Those people that are also highly adaptive. I'm just giving you an example, okay? But then I'm absolutely certain that we are going to get American immigration here in Europe because America is not going to turn into a nice place if this continues. If this continues, okay, people will not have options. People will just not have options, and if they know there are jobs available, they will come. I sometimes joke around with my mom when we talk about this. And this same thing happened, for example, with my grandfather's mother. Okay, she was from Germany and she happened to have some money. Okay, but the man that she married here afterwards, he was the grandson of a German, but as her family had money, okay, but his family, they had come here as soldiers. Okay, the same thing on my father's side. Well, I have some German too. They came here as soldiers. The French side, they came here as winemakers. Okay, farmers basically. Some of them farmhands. Okay, nothing to be ashamed of about. Okay, others were soldiers, like I said, and this is common. This is common, and people need to relax about this and need to understand this. What survives is the culture. If a culture is strong, that culture will survive. If the culture is weak, it will either mutate or change into something else, or it will break away. And what I'm seeing in the United States right now is a cultural breakdown. It was never that united, but it had a common thread. When you hear about all that bullshit about the American dream, that was only an American dream for the whites, sorry, but it's true. But there was that sense, and that sense of God, work, and home, for example, that is rather familiar to us too during the times of fascism around here. But whatever. And putting your hand in your hearts and praying to the Almighty for your flag and all of that. That was a culture. And the pop culture and all of that, okay, in the movies, and that was a form of culture, okay. I won't make any appreciations about the validity of the culture, but it was a culture. And what I'm seeing right now is a complete breakdown of that culture. And if a country does not have, how can I say this, in a way that it's not offensive. I'm trying not to be offensive. I'm trying to say this without bias. But if a country does not have some sort of common path of union, that country will fall. Okay, even if people are different, even if they have different ethnicities or whatever, if they have that common thread of culture, they will stand together. And right now, I'm certain that, for example, if someone invaded the country, the Americans would stand together and maybe they would unite and whatever. I'm certain of that. But right now, uh, no, there is too many different. I saw some videos about some regions from the inside of the United States, from Appalachia, for example, and it was a third world country. And then you have places that are nice. Look, I'm not saying that, okay? I'm not saying there are not nice places in the US. I'm not even saying that there are not safe places in the United States. But the issue here is in what it is turning into. And then I keep listening to these lunatics talking about conspiracy theories. And for example, I was listening to Mel Gibson complaining about Hollywood and how Hollywood was falling and whatever. It was too expensive. And then he was blaming Gavin Newsom and he was blaming this and he was blaming that. Look, you, some of all of you people, you are walking around dreaming. Your president, he increased your. Every time you listen to him saying tariff this and tariff that, he is increasing your taxes. What? You think, for example, Europe was selling you a French craft, a French, I don't know, a French bag or something like that at $100, and now since Trump imposed those tariffs, they are going to sell them the bags to you for $50. Are you completely nuts? The French will continue to sell them to you at $100. Maybe they will even increase the price because you want the product. You need the product. I'm talking about bags. I can be talking about anything. Okay, that bag will arrive at the United States, and the French producer will get its $100. And then the person that imported those goods into the United States, then they will pay the state that tariff. And then you, when you go into your grocery store or your shop, whatever, you are going to pay that tax plus the profit of the importer, and the state will still get profit from that sale. You will still pay taxes to the state. And I don't know how a group of people that claim to be so good at business fail to understand the most basic aspect of business: the farmers. Trump maybe is going to give them a bailout. I don't believe it that much, but maybe he will. Now you tell me, what is the value of bailing out soybean farmers if they won't have any market to sell their soybeans to? China is already buying soybeans from other places. Europe doesn't need American soybeans. We don't need it. No one needs it. Maybe you'll find a country that will buy it, but you bet your ass that they are going to try to pay you as less as possible, and you will be desperate to sell them. So you can bail out your farming industry, but it will collide, it will crash, and then it will happen. What is happening right now? I have talked about this about 3 months ago already, 2 or 3 months ago in August, sorry, already around almost 400 family farms in the United States had gone under. And of course, there are big companies buying them out and turning them into businesses. So you will have food. The food will be produced in those companies, but you won't have good food. Okay, you won't have farmers. You won't have dedicated farmers that have been working in those farms maybe for generations. And that I know people keep saying they voted for it. Okay, they voted for it, all right. But you are the one that is going to buy and eat shit food. Okay, bye. Well, this has gone long enough, almost an hour of me ranting. I hope you found this interesting. I say you keep an eye on this, okay? Keep an eye on the value of the dollar, on the inflation, and all of that. And when you see it reach a peak, and then apparently it's starting to go down, you know the crash is coming. In my opinion, it's already here. Okay, it's already here. Uh, European trading hubs, they dumped American investments. Okay, I think Germany, the UK has a lot. UK has a lot of American debt, and I think that is one of the reasons why Trump is treading a bit more careful with the UK because he knows the UK. But then again, he knows the UK depends on him. And that is very sad. Okay, like we saw in Egypt, that entire parade where he even tried to hug Meloni, and luckily she dodged the bullet. You know, and then he was talking about how pretty she is. But she's not bad. A bit of a nut for me, but all right. But Mrs. Meloni, my sincere apologies. Chonaragas. Chonaragas. Yeah, I have to be polite. Okay? Sorry. Well, I'm just an insignificant guy recording videos online. Now, I hope you liked this video. I hope you found it interesting. And, well, stay safe, folks. Okay? And if you're in the USA, I'm sorry for not bringing you good news. And the only thing I can say is this: I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that I'm wrong. That the country doesn't start to crash as quickly as I said. Bye. And my cat is here again.